Hello! In this Unity tutorial, we're going to start taking a look at creating our very own first-person shooter type game. So in the previous two tutorials, we took a look at the basic functionality of ProBuilder, which is a 3D modeling tool provided by Unity that is built into Unity itself, which is really nice because it allows us to edit our objects directly in the scene. We'll be able to see the changes as they happen in the scene. And it eliminates that process of having to go from an external 3D modeling tool like Maya or Blender into Unity. We can do all the work here. But enough about that. Let's jump right into the first-person shooter type game. So before we do that, in the previous two tutorials, you created your own map, and I know yours is going to look a lot better than mine. But this is what I left off with, and all I'm going to do for this tutorial is we're going to go ahead and get a first-person player inside of this map, and then we're going to give them a very basic gun, and then I'm going to provide you the scripts to be able to essentially shoot the other player. So to get started here, we need a first-person controller. Now you can either use the Unity standard assets by going to the asset store, searching for standard assets. There's another one that I'd like to show you here, which is one by Very Hot Shark, his own first-person controller. I found it to be very nice. So I would encourage you to take a look at this. You can support him, but we're going to go ahead and we would like to download this. So I'm going to download this zip file here. And what I need to do is I need to open up my File Explorer to this location. So I'm going to right-click inside of Unity, Show in Explorer. And then this is going to provide the assets folder, or access to the assets folder here in my ProBuilder demo project. Now that this is done downloading, I'm going to click, hold, and drag it and drop it into the assets folder. And you can see it here. And then I'm going to go ahead and unzip this. So we'll extract files. You can use any tool, of course, to extract this zip. Let's go back to Unity now. Once that's done and unzipped, it's going to go ahead and automatically import any assets that it finds as it scans through the folder. So we'll just wait a moment for that to be done here. Okay, now that that's all finished, let's go ahead and go into that folder that we just created or extracted from, the first-person controller. Let's go into the assets, prefabs, and here is the prefab for the first-person controller. We'll drag that right into there. Now if you notice this asset over here, we'll bring this down. It has a main camera already, so I'm actually going to go ahead and delete the existing main camera that we have because we're going to be using the one that is on here. I'm going to go ahead and rotate this around by 180 degrees on the Y, just so he's facing towards our map. If we take a look at the game preview here, we can see our not so beautiful map, but that's okay. So this is going to be the first-person controller that we're going to use, and I'm going to go ahead and just press play just to make sure that I'm able to move around. And you can see, now I can see around here, and I can actually start walking. Now we're getting some null reference exceptions. Let's take a look at why that's happening. So I'm going to pause it, and let's click on the console. So it looks like here I'm getting some null reference exceptions, object reference not set to an instance of an object on interaction controller 78. First, I'm just going to take a quick look at the script, and you can open this up using an editor of your choice. Typically, you'll have Microsoft Visual Studio installed, especially if you're working out of the labs. Another one is Visual Studio Code that I highly recommend as well. Now the interaction controller here, let me see what that is doing. So it is throwing an error on line 78. Line 78, here is this UI panel, it looks like. Let me go ahead and close this pop-up window here, which would suggest to me that the UI panel itself is likely null. If we take a look here, we'll see if we can see the UI panel, which is here. Looks like it's a serializable field. Let's go back to Unity real quick. And if we take a look at the first-person controller, let me bring the inspector over a little bit more here. We can see all of the properties that are on it. One of them is the interaction controller here. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to uncheck this And let's see if that will solve our null pointer exception. Now I will have to come out of play mode, otherwise we'll undo my changes as you just saw. And let's see if those null pointers go away. Alright, that's significantly better. Perfect. We do have some warning messages here, such as the main camera is missing, but those are for individual scripts that we don't need to worry about at this time. Alright, so that is looking great. You can either be using, again, the standard assets first-person controller or the one that we just downloaded together. Either or will work. So the first thing we're going to need to do is I'm going to go ahead and just create an enemy object. So to do that, I'm just going to use something very simple, such as let's use a capsule. And we'll have to bring the capsule up, so I'm going to right-click on the transform property in the inspector and select reset. Press W on the keyboard, or we can click up here. We want to be able to move this object over. Let's see. For some reason I'm not able to interact directly with that. Let's make sure so my gizmos are on. Let me select on the capsule itself. Not entirely sure. Let's see. Zoom out a little bit. Oh, so that was a mistake of myself. I did not pay attention to this bar up here, which is, I did not have it on object selection mode as that. So I forgot that I still had the ProBuilder window open. That's no problem at all. Alright, let's go ahead and move this over here now. And I'll move it up just a little bit. Likely we just need to move it to a value of 1 to get it sitting on the ground. And I'm going to create a material to use. I have some materials here, such as green is the good people side, red is the enemy side. We'll create maybe one more material, right-click in this folder, and we can create a new material. Just gotta remember right there, perfect, and I'll just call this yellow because we'll make it a nice yellow color. Just like that, maybe, perfect. And then we'll go ahead, click, hold, drag that yellow onto our capsule. So now if we take a look through our game view, we'll be able to see it a little bit like that. We could click on that directional light as well, and just rotate it a bit so we can see this character a little bit better. So bring it to about 130 degrees. Alright, so now we have something that represents our enemy that we're going to be shooting at. Well, now this is where we're going to start getting into some coding. So first I want to talk you through the logic before we actually start implementing it. So we are currently the first person player, and of course we have our enemy here. So we're going to have a health script. The health script is going to contain some data, such as what is the current health of the player and what is the maximum health. So for simplicity's sake, let's go ahead and write that out together. And I think it'll be good if I explain it as I go. First we'll create a new folder called scripts. And we'll go inside the scripts folder. We're going to right-click inside there and create a new C# script, and we're going to call this health. Let's go ahead and open up that health script in your favorite editor. I already have Visual Studio open, so that should prompt me to see health here. Perfect. So this is not going to be the introduction to coding. I'm just going to assume that you have a foundation of the C# programming language, and we will go from there. So what we do need is we need to be able to know what the current health is and the max health. So we're going to say something along the lines of public int, and we'll say max health, just like so. We won't set a value here because we're going to be able to set a value in the inspector. We will create a private int for current health. And when the scene is loaded into memory, we want to set the current health equal to whatever the max health is. So if we enter 100, for example, in the inspector, the current health will also become 100. Okay, so that is actually all we need to do for the moment. What we're going to do is delete the update function, and we're going to create one more function. So we're going to create a public void, and we're going to call this function, for example, death. And what we'll do in here is we'll just print something out. We'll say debug.log. We'll say enemy died, for example. So that is what we want to be called when the enemy character dies. For example, we hit them with enough bullets, their health drops below 0. In this function, you would do, for example, the death animation for them. We could reference the animator and do animation.playDeath animation or whatever. We also need one more function, a public void, and we're going to call this take damage. So the question is, well, how much damage do we want to take? Well, we're going to specify that with the formal parameter, which is going to be int the damage to take, you could even call it. And what we're going to say is something along the lines of this current health minus equals is shorthand notation for current health equals current health minus the damage to take. So I will just do minus equals damage to take. So I like to do something, I like to check if it's below 0, because we'll likely be displaying the damage on the screen, maybe above the character's name or in the upper right corner, something like that. We don't want them to have a negative health. So we're going to say something along the lines of, okay, if the current health is less than 0, we just want to go ahead and set the current health to 0. Now, we need to go ahead and call that death function. So we'll say something along the lines of, if current health equal 0, meaning current health is 0, we want to call death. Okay, so we could combine this. We could say if current health less than equals 0, set it to 0, call death here. That would eliminate the need for this second if statement. That is perfectly fine. Maybe we'll do that just for readability. I like that, but we could also have a separation of concerns and just keep that by itself. However you want to do it is perfectly acceptable. So if the current health is less than equal 0, just make sure it's 0. Go ahead and die. Now, there is a bug here. It's not an intentional bug, but it's something that we're going to notice when we play the game. If the character is dead, for example, so their health reached below 0, we call a death animation. What happens if we keep hitting them with bullets? Well, you can imagine that if we have some sort of animator set up and the death is likely a trigger, each time we hit the take damage, it's going to come and say, oh, the current health is below 0, because, right, if we do 10 units of damage to the character, that's going to bring it to -10, then back to 0, and he'll kind of loop the death animation over and over. So this may be a common glitch that you see in video games that are not well polished, but you shoot the character, they stand back up, but then they play their death animation again. That's because somebody forgot to do a check there. To do that check, I think I'm going to leave it out for now, just so I can show you what we mean, but keep that in mind, because we're going to come back to the script to fix that in a little bit. Now, let's go ahead and go back to Unity. And we've created the script. We should have no red down here. If we go to the console and clear, you should have no red here. If you do have red, read what the message says, but make sure that your script looks exactly like mine. You're likely missing closing bracket, semicolon, or something of that nature. Okay, so back here inside of Unity, we're going to go ahead and attach this script to our enemy. So right now our enemy is just our capsule. So to do that, I'm going to press F2, and I would just like to rename this to enemy so I know, who we're dealing with here. And we'll go ahead and minimize some of the things on the inspector because we don't need all this information about the mesh render and capsule collider at the moment. And then we're going to go ahead and add a new component, and we're going to add the health, just like that. Perfect. Let's go ahead and set the health before we forget to, because I guarantee I will forget to if I don't do it right now. The max health to 100. Alright, so now when we start, and we'll go ahead and just save Control-S to make sure we don't lose our work, the current health will be set to 100. Now if we play, of course, we'll be able to walk around, but nothing is going to happen. So we need to be able to say, hey, I need you to take some damage when I have a gun and I shoot you. Well, for the purposes of this demo, let's go ahead and create a, fake gun. You can go in the asset store here, of course, and search. Well, let's actually see what we have. If we search for gun, See if there's any free ones that we can use. We'll go ahead and free assets. Looks like we have some good ones here. So I think what we'll do is, let's go ahead and I'll just pick a random one here. It doesn't matter. Which one we pick. You can pick one that you like. We'll just take a look at the download size and see how big it is. So this one is quite big. 140 megabytes for a little gun, I think, is a bit too much. So I'm going to pick a different one here. Just keep in mind as you are developing these assets too. Let's see, I must have purchased this one a little while back. To take a look at their size, 20 megabytes is not unreasonable for this. 140 megabytes for a single pistol. I'm sure maybe had a demo scene or something associated with it, but that is just a little bit too much for my liking. Because especially as you get ready to release these games, we have to package all this stuff up, and it's going to be, a decent size at the very end, because all of these megabytes and gigabytes are going to add up pretty quickly, and that is what constitutes the total download size of your game, and we want to keep that as small as possible. You may hear the phrase, low polygon is better, which it definitely is, because the more polygons we have, yes, our game has higher resolution, but at the same time, it comes at a performance expense, and that's something that we want to try to avoid if possible. Alright, so this is just about done importing, and looks like it is all set here. Let me go back to our scene. And we'll confirm that it is imported by taking a look at the assets here, and we have the sci-fi gun. And let's take a look at what we have in the prefabs folder, and looks like we have a bunch of cool guns here. And let's just take a look at what they look like. So I'm going to drag one in, see if we can see it in front of us. Yep, that looks really cool. If we bring it up on the Y, oops, not the directional light, excuse me, the gun that we just brought in, there it is. Well, what we want to do is, of course, we want to have this gun follow us around. One common trick that people like to do is, let's go ahead and bring down this. Now, if you're using the standard assets, you want to locate wherever the main camera is, because what we're going to do is we're going to take this gun, and we're going to make it a child of the main camera. What does that mean? It means wherever this main camera goes, the gun is going to follow along with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, and what I need to do is we have the first person character here, and we have the gun there. We're going to zero this thing out first. So let's do 0, 0, 0. So that's going to put it directly on top of there. You'll notice that this particular gun is at negative 180 degrees. I am going to rotate it out just like that. Now, if you can find a gun that looks something like this, where you have the Z-axis, which in this case is the blue axis, pointing forward, that will be of tremendous help. Because what we're going to end up doing is when the gun shoots, we want to be able to use the vector 3.forward. The vector 3.forward corresponds to the blue axis here, so you're going to shoot a bullet out from this direction. You want to go forward. If your blue axis is going out this way, or if it's pointing up and down, the 3D modeler likely didn't do a good job setting up the pivots and such correctly. This one looks perfect, so we'll go ahead and use it. If we take a look here, while it looks like it's right on top of our face, we can see the gun here. Now this is where we're going to make some modifications. So if we take a look here and kind of how we're facing here, we have the X going across and the Y going up and down. So what happens, we'll be in the game tab for this, and let's just see, if we put X at 1, that might be a little bit too much. Let's try 0.5, a little bit too much. 0.4, 0.3. That's looking pretty good. Let's bring it down a little bit. So the Y, it's at 0. Let's try negative 0.5. Too low, 0.3. That's looking pretty good. Now, Z, I think, will be good for the moment. Now, what you may notice is a phenomenon here called clipping. So camera clipping is very prevalent in first-person games where either your camera glitches through the wall and you can see, for example, parts of the map you're not supposed to be able to see, or in this case, my camera's clipping based on this gun here. So if we take a look at the main camera, I just want to verify that something's set here, which is our clipping planes. 0.3 doesn't seem like a lot, but it actually is. If you watch this gun down here, and we set this to a value of 0, you'll notice that the gun comes back into focus. So I would set that, if you set it to 0, it has to have some clipping planes. It can't just be 0, which would be totally, it'll have 0.1, which is next to nothing. But 0.3 was a bit too much. If we bring this up something like 1, our gun disappears, or even 0.5, you know, half of it's gone. That's not what we want. So, alright, so we childed the gun to the main camera. If we take a look here by pressing play, and let's see what happens. You'll notice my gun now follows me around. Well, looks kind of weird because my character doesn't have a shadow. Alright, so now that we have this all set up, this is going to be the exciting part because now we get to shoot from our gun. So we created a health script for the enemy, but now we need to create a shooting script for the gun. So let's go ahead and we'll come back out to the assets folder, and in the scripts let's go ahead and create a new script, C# script, and we'll just call this gun. Let's go ahead and open that up in Visual Studio, and I will talk you through this. So this gun script is going to be attached to the weapon itself that is going to detect when the player presses the left mouse button to be able to shoot. We want to cast a ray and see if we hit the other player. So to do that, what we're going to do is first we need to check in the update function if the player presses down the left mouse button. So we can say something along the lines of if input.get mouse button down. Now the difference between get mouse button down, get mouse button will fire continuously when it's held down. Get mouse button down will only fire once when it has been pressed, so that is definitely what you want to do. You want to do 0. 0 is for the left, 1 is for the right, and 2, I believe, is for the middle. If the player presses down on the middle mouse button, we want to essentially shoot. So to be able to shoot, we need a location to shoot from, and then we need to be able to fire out a ray. So let me go back to Unity and explain what I mean a little bit more in detail. So if we take a look here at the gun. Now previously I said it's a good thing to have this Z going forward. What we're going to add now is essentially a gun tip. So what I'm going to do is clicking on the object itself, we're going to right click on it and we're going to create an empty. So this empty is going to be at the center of the object here. I'm going to turn off gizmos just for a second so I can see just this. Now what we want to be able to do, I'm going to double click on this just so I can focus in a little bit better so my movement is not so jaggedy. If you ever notice you're flopping around too much, double click on an object and then zoom into where it is. That will help tremendously. Now what I need to be able to do is I'm going to put this essentially at the barrel location. So this is going to help if I can take a look by clicking my cursor gizmo up here. And what we're going to do is we are going to place it to the best of our ability right at the gun tip here. So let's go ahead and rotate around. That looks like it is square on where the gun is. Let's take a look from the top. That looks perfect. You could even add a little thing like this, where I believe we have to have gizmos on. Might be a little bit too big for what we're doing, but it will kind of show you generally where it is. I think this is too big of a use case for that. Let me go ahead and select none for that. Okay, so this is going to be our gun tip, and I'm actually going to rename this by pressing F2 and renaming it to gun tip, just like that. So now, inside of our code, let's come back here. We're going to create a variable. So we'll say something along the lines of public game object, and we're going to call this gun tip, because this is going to be the object where we want to essentially fire the ray from. Now I would like to talk to you a little bit about what rays are. So I opened up this page here. There are some great resources on the web for raycasting. Just search for Unity raycast. You'll be able to find a bunch of different tutorials, and that'll probably explain it a lot better than I can. But to give you an idea of what's happening, a raycast is essentially an invisible line that is going to be shot out from a particular object in a given direction. So what we want to do is, from our gun tip, we are going to shoot a ray out, and we're asking a question. Did you hit something or not? Now you can specify a maximum distance for the ray to go. So for example, if you want to mimic bullet drop-off, you could, well, this would not be the best way to handle bullet drop-off, and I'll explain that in just a minute. But if you wanted to say only go 1,000 yards, you could specify, you can convert that to feet, and then you can specify, okay, I want this to go, 3,000 feet, and put that as the maximum distance. Or if you do math.infinity, the bullet will go forever, so you could shoot it halfway across the world and it would still hit them. So raycasts are very performant efficient. You want to try and use these when possible. Now, the other solution, of course, is to use an actual bullet. So what they'll typically do is fire out a raycast. If it hits, you'll, at the point of contact, you'll instantiate a blood effect, and then the character will take damage. You don't want to fire actual bullets if you don't have to. Why? Because it puts a tax on the physics system. You can imagine if you're sitting there with a assault rifle or something in your game, it's going to be shooting out, I don't know, 30 bullets in less than 5 seconds. I don't know how fast they actually shoot out, but that's 30 objects, in under 5 seconds, and especially across a network game. And let's say you have, 10 to 20 people connected to that. Those 10 to 20 people need to know about all those networked objects. And you can imagine that that's going to get pretty inefficient performance very quickly, because you have 20 people all shooting their assault rifles all at the same time. That's 30 bullets times 20 players, which is way more than we needed. 600 bullets to be able to deal with. And that's just per second, and then keep doing that. Network programming is something that's going to be out of the scope of this tutorial, definitely, because that is a very complex subject. But I just want you to keep that in mind as you're going forward, to try and use raycast when possible, because if you are actually using bullets, then you will need to sync their physics over the network, which is not hard to do. It's just network computationally expensive. Because what ends up happening is the server, which is responsible for managing all of the players on the network, the player shoots the bullet, the server will compute every step of the way where that bullet needs to go, and then it will send the location detail back. So you have point A to the server and back, and then that'll be happening across all screens. The reason why is to prevent cheating, right? You don't want people to teleport behind each other. You don't want bullets to do weird things, because this is typically in a server authoritative model where the server has complete authority over how game objects interact with each other, how they move inside the scene. You definitely don't want client authority, and especially in a first-person shooter game, because that's how hacks happen. If the client has full authority to do anything, they have full authority over their movement, and they start doing stuff where they can develop, client bots and teleporting and all that stuff. A whole different topic, and I'm getting too deep into it. Use raycast when possible, but I'm not telling you cannot use actual bullets. If you want to mimic bullet drop and all that stuff, you can definitely do it. Alright, enough about that backstory here. It provides some code here, specifically the website I'm on, learn.unity.com. This is tremendously more detailed than we're going to get into in this case. I just wanted to show you a little bit here about what the physics raycast looks like, specifically this line here. If physics.raycast, where do we want to cast it from? What direction are we casting it from? What am I putting the data that the ray hits into, and what is the range? So those are 4 very important parameters that I just quickly highlighted, but I'm going to go into detail with them in just a moment. So I'm actually going to steal this thing because I am going to use it right here. So pasting that in now, and I think we're going to be missing a closing one of those. So if physics.raycast, where do we want to start from? Well, I'd like to start from the gun tip. I think that's a good place. I want to go from the gun tip.transform.forward, which in this case is going to be this blue line extending out from that. I need something to put data into, so let me just write the code real quick, which is going to be, your raycast hit. And the typical convention for this is just to call it hit. And then what is the weapon range? I'll just put 1,000. You could exclude this, I believe, entirely if you wanted to. Do something like Visual Studio Code is very nice in the sense that it will provide you with some overloaded methods here. So the ray, the max distance, layer mask, and such. So something along the lines of maybe 1000F, I think, is something that we want to do. And let me see exactly what they are doing inside here. The weapon range, let's take a look at what these variable types are real quick. So the weapon range is a float, which makes perfect sense. 50 is good. I'm just using 1,000. You can, of course, have that as whatever you would like. We need to access the transform. So let's do gun tip. This is a game object, so we can access its transform property just like that. And then hit as well. So let me see specifically what it is angry about. We can always take a look at that here. Let me clear these out. So it wants a argument 1 cannot convert to a vector 3. So it wants the exact position. So we'll do transform dot position. And that is actually all that it was complaining about. So that is perfect. So let's actually just see if this works. So we'll just put a debug.log statement in, saying we'll put hit in here. And I think that'll be perfect. So if the player presses down the left mouse button, we'll go ahead and shoot something out from there. And then if we hit something, we'll say hit. Maybe we want to put out the name of it as well. So we'd hit plus hit dot, let's see, we do transform dot, we should be able to get the name of it somehow, just like that. Put a space after this so they're not pushed together. Alright, so we'll go ahead and go back to Unity now. We'll double check that we do not have any errors. Perfect. Go ahead and clear that out. So we'll go ahead and click on this, and let me just close up this here. We're going to go ahead and attach the gun script now directly to that, and we need to add the gun tip, which is just like that. Alright, let's see what happens. I'm going to go to the console so that we can see if we print any messages, and cross our fingers and see if we get something. So we'll just aim at the ground, and we'll shoot at the ground, and it says hit cube 1. Cool. Let's shoot forward, see if we can hit anything. Hit enemy. Perfect. So that is working. Now it's not very helpful that we don't have a icon directly in the center of our screen. So let's do that real quick. We'll do UI, and then we're going to do image. So if you take a look at that, it's going to put it in the lower left-hand corner here. I'm going to just click on this canvas that it created, and we're going to call this crosshair. Now, this is where you can get fancy and put in a fancy crosshair. I'm just going to click over here in the rect transform. I'm going to hold down Shift Alt, and I'm going to center it right in the center of our screen. And I'm going to make it significantly smaller, something like 25 by 25, or 252. And then we can pick a new image for it. I do not have a lot of images here, so I'll just pick the ball like that and maybe make it a red color. And let's actually make it smaller, maybe 15 by 15. Perfect. So you could, of course, attach a different image here to make it look a lot better than my red circle. But now I can actually see, what I'm aiming at. So if I click on this, now I can sit here and boom, hit enemy over and over and over again. So that's really exciting. So far I can do that. I can shoot the ground, which is just called cube 1, which is why you should name your stuff better than I do. Alright, so that is working. Now, how do we apply damage to this? Well, I'm glad you asked, because what we're going to have to do now is, now that we know that we can hit the object, we need to be able to get some component off of it. So what we're going to say is, we're going to say, well, we created a script previously called health, and let's just call it health. Now, when we shoot the ray out, whatever the ray hits, whether it hits something or it doesn't, if it doesn't hit something, it's going to be null. If it does hit something, it's going to be stored here. So what I like to do is, we'll say health is equal to hit.gameObject, or hit dot, we'll do transform dot get component, and the component that we want to get off of it is the health script, right, because that is going to be on it. And that's all we actually need to do. So we need to put another if check in here, right? We want to make sure that health is not null. If health is not equal to null, because if it's null and we try to perform an operation on it, like health dot take damage, and it's null, it's going to crash your game. So if it's not null, we're going to go say in health take damage, and how much damage do we want to do? Well, we could do like 10 damage, right, because it takes an integer, which is a whole number. It's not very good practice to put concrete numbers in here. So when you looked at the other script, you'll notice that they put their constants at the top of the class, which is what we want to do. So we could have something like public int gun damage, and we should probably have public float max gun distance, and we will just put those two things in their correct places because it's never a good idea to hard code constants in there. The reason being, this is a very small class, but it's not uncommon for classes to get over 1,000 lines long. And if you're looking for specific constants that are not referencing a variable at the top, it's going to be very difficult to find it. So I recommend doing this. And before we forget, a second after you add a public, I would recommend going right to the object and setting that variable, because otherwise I'm going to forget. And then I'm going to sit there scratching my head for, oops, I don't want to do 1,000 damage, I'll do 10. Scratching my head for 15 minutes wondering what I did wrong. Okay, so now, what did we have inside our health script? So we said, if the health is less than or equal to 0, set it to 0, say they died. Okay, well, let's see if that actually works. So it should take 10 bullets to actually kill this guy. I'm going to press escape real quick so I can go to my console. And let's shoot this guy. So it looks like, there we go, enemy died. So I had to click 10 times. You may have heard me spam clicking a little bit. Notice that it's shooting it over and over. Now this is not really indicative of what's happening because we need to be able to see how much health he has left. So something we could do is, let's actually go ahead and create a new canvas. So what we're going to do is UI, and we'll do text. Now that's going to add it to the existing canvas. That's not what I want to do. So I'm going to create a new canvas just like that. And on this one, I'm going to right-click UI, add some text. And I'm going to call this health text because all it's going to be responsible for is showing me what the health of that character is. Now you notice that it is here. Now it's being currently overlaid on the screen. That's not what I want to happen. I am going to format it to how I want though. I'm going to center it. I'm going to make it a bright white color. I'd like to make it a little bit bigger, so maybe set the font size to like 30. Now I'm not going to be able to see it because it's going to be overflown, so I'm going to go ahead and overflow these two things. Perfect. So now what I need to do is we're going to go ahead and set the canvas to a world space canvas, so not pixel perfect, excuse me. World space, just like that. And then what we're going to do is find our enemy, which our enemy is right here. We're going to child the canvas itself to the enemy because we want this to follow along. And then we're going to do 0, 0, 0. Oops, not on the enemy, excuse me. I'm going to bring the enemy back. We want to do that to the canvas. 0, 0, 0 on the canvas. Now, I may have made that a bit too big. If we zoom out, this is absolutely massive, so we definitely don't want it that big. Let's go ahead and come back over here, and we're going to bring that font size down quite tremendously. Let's try scaling down our canvas size. Let's try 0.1 on all respective axes. Now, if we take a look at the enemy here, zoom all the way back in, that text is still pretty big. So instead, we're going to have to make it a little bit smaller. So we'll click on the health text, and let's try 0.01. How small is that going to be? That looks actually pretty good. So we'll just bring it up here. We will rotate it by 180 degrees on the Y just so we can see it. And what we're going to do is we're just going to say health. And we'll just set it to 0 for the time being. Because inside our enemy script, this is going to be really cool. What we're going to do is we're going to, well, actually inside our health, we're going to create a reference to that text. So we're going to copy and paste this using Unity Engine. And we're going to say, I want to use UnityEngine.UI, which stands for the user interface. And we're going to create a public variable. We're going to say public text, and we'll call this health text. And remember what I say, once you create a public variable, go set it immediately. So we'll come back here, we'll save, we'll just make sure that we have no compilation issues when we clear inside of our console. So then, if we take a look at the enemy, which has the health, you'll notice a new space for health text. Go ahead and click, hold, drag health text to health text right there, creating that association, so you see that there. Now what we're going to need to do is, when we set the current health, we're just going to say health text.text is equal to, and we're going to say health, and then we need to convert this, so we'll say health plus whatever the current health is dot toString. So that is just going to take that int and convert it to a string. And then similarly here, we're going to go ahead and bring that down. Whenever they take damage, we're going to set it just like that. Now this is bad practice. The reason why this is bad practice is because we're duplicating code here and here. We don't want to do that, because if we make a change to say, okay, I want to set up maybe health, if I want to change this to life points instead, now I got to go change it up there as well. So we want to try to avoid that if possible, and to do that, what we can do is we can just create a method real quick. We'll do something along the lines of public void set health text, and it will be whatever the health is of the player. Honestly, we don't even really, we'll just say whatever the current health is, which we can access because it's part of this class. So that'll be even easier. All we have to do is take this line here, move it down there, and we'll just go ahead and, instead of where we're doing these two things, all we need to do is call this method now instead. So set health text just like that. Because we are setting it here and here, we need to set it initially when the scene starts and every time they take damage. We need to do it this way. Well, we need to do it this way because anytime we need to change whatever this says, it'll be a lot easier to make one change here rather than having to change that. Likely your method name is not going to change. If it does, then you have to bite the bullet and change it everywhere, but for the most part, they try to keep those consistent as possible. Let's just see if that works. So we'll go ahead and save that. Make sure you have no compilation errors. If you do, take a look back at the code to make sure that yours aligns up with what I have. Then we'll go ahead and press play. And we see that the health is at 100, perfect. Now when we shoot, I'm going, now they're dead. Now do notice here, the enemy died. The health is -10, which is not cool, so that's a bug. And it's also, I can spam there and it's going to print enemy died over and over, which is a problem that way back in the beginning of the video I said we'd have to tackle. Well, the reason why that's happening is because we don't have a way to say that the character is already dead. So to do that, typically what people will do is they'll create a Boolean value. So Boolean being a true-false value. So we'll say something along the lines of is alive. And by default, that's going to be set to false. So in the beginning, we'll just say is alive is true, because we want them to be alive. And if this is less than or equal to 0, we're going to go ahead and set that to false, because they're obviously not alive. But this is not alone going to work. We need to introduce that to our if check to say if they are alive and their health is less than this, then we can go ahead and play the death animation. So this is shorthand notation here, saying is alive. This has to evaluate to true inside of an if statement. So if they are alive, true, and their current health is less than or equal to 0, say they're not alive anymore, set their health to 0, and then they die. So now you may notice a bug here. So the second bug was, well, their health was -10. Well, the reason why that was happening is because we say current health minus equals damage to take, which set it to -10, and then we did the death. We just need to move this from up there to below here, and that will work just great now. So we'll come back here, and then we'll go ahead and play. So now when we're, running around, now we can shoot the character, their health is going to go down. Looks like we still have a bug, but do notice that the enemy died is still equal to, or it only printed out once, which is that. Now you may have been screaming at me, and I do apologize. Let's take a look here. So the reason why this is happening is because the current health is always being subtracted. Whether or not their health is greater than or equal to 0, it does not matter in this case. So we're going to put our big brain to use here, And we're going to say, well, I only want this stuff inside this method to actually function if the character is alive, right? That doesn't make any sense. So we're going to say is alive and current health is less than or equal to 0. Okay, well, let's go ahead and minus away the damage to take. So what we can actually do now is we're going to move this. So if they are alive, go ahead and subtract the damage. And then if their current health less equal 0, now we can go ahead and do all this good stuff. And we want to go ahead and bring this up into here, just like that. So let's walk through the logic together real quick. If they're alive, so they have to be alive to do this, they can take damage. So we'll take damage. If their health is less than or equal to 0, then they're obviously not alive anymore. Their health should be 0. We call it death. We can keep this here because it's not going to continuously update this because it's never going to get back into that is alive once we set it to false inside there. Now let's go ahead and test our new logic. That'll be really embarrassing if I get it wrong here, but we'll see. We'll bring it down all the way to 0, and perfect. Enemy died just once. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm spamming my mouse and they're not dying anymore. So now you can do so much exciting stuff with this, right? You can, let me show you a few things that you can do. So when they click to, shoot the gun, inside of the gun here, you can have a reference to an audio source, and then you can do audio source.play. So I won't do the full thing here, but I'll do that in the second tutorial of this series, but we can make gun sounds inside this script. And what'll be really nice here is, like for example, as you're shooting the bullets out, you'll likely want to instantiate, a particle system showing that the gun muzzle was flashing. At the point of impact where the bullet hit the character, you'll likely want to instantiate, like blood effect or whatever a bullet looks like when it's hitting something effect. You have that information. This hit.transform.position. That is the position where the ray intersected with the object itself. Now, one important thing to note is if you are using the hit.transform.position to instantiate a prefab, such as a blood splatter effect at that location, you'll want to use the normal of it. So at the point of intersection, for example, if this is my object, this is my ray coming in, just like this. Let's say my ray hit it at an angle. The normal of this is going to be perpendicular to the face of the object. So if we want it to go directly out, you're going to want to use the normal of it. So I think it's hit.transform.normal or something like that. But take a look at the normal. That's going to be going straight out. Otherwise, if you just use the hit.transform.position, it's going to do the splatter effect at the angle in which it was impacted, which may be rotated, which is going to be a problem. Because it should be based on how the character is looking at them, because likely the particle system is either going to be a 2D texture that's instantiated, or it's going to be a particle system that's fired in a particular direction, and you want that to be facing the player. Alright, so I think that'll be enough for this one since I've been rambling for quite a bit now, but I hope that gets you started with your first-person shooter type game. Now that we're able to have health, we can access the health and shoot our gun. It's really up to you now to decide what exciting things you want to do. If you want to add a timer to it, add some music to it. Adding some more complex stuff, such as AI, of course, is going to add to the complexity of that, but I'm happy to do that in future tutorials. If you have any suggestions for the series, please recommend them to your instructor, and I can go ahead and create some videos about them. But of course, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out or leave a comment in the comment section below. Thank you very much.